Today's chat is brought to you by, well, all of your support. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through Podbean's crowdfunding, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the FFC, please be sure to visit our website and click on the support link. Even a single dollar helps, and for those of you who are already patrons, thank you again for your generosity. You may have heard the whispers of guardians gathering in the shadows, exploring the mysteries of this world and the worlds which surround us. We are all in search of truth. Sometimes we need to focus that search, focus that fire. And so we come together. Join us. Join the discussion. Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Welcome back for episode 174 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on July 19th over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Our topic for tonight's episode is going to be a look at the Chronicon. But first, let's run through a quick introduction of those on the show for tonight. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86. Next up, we have our own master of social media, the one and only Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, I hope you're doing well. How has the week treated you so far?
1 second. I think I got it. Yeah, I got it. There's been a mosquito in my freaking office.
So Green is literally beating off the people trying to send her whips, is what I'm understanding.
I mean, I've only gotten two tonight.
Chat fatality.
I mean, it's been, oh my gosh, it's been really warm here in Colorado, and the mosquitoes and the flies have been coming in to the houses a lot.
Green is Mr. Miyagi.
I'll take it. Oh, I take it.
Thank you, Black Flag.
Yes, but yeah, it's been a good week. It's been a creative week as far as like getting stuff done. But beyond that, I got my bad juju this week. Did not flawless it, but did solo it.
That's cool. It's a pulse rifle.
Yeah, it's actually really good in Crucible. Took it into comp on Wednesday.
Okay.
What?
All right. So.
What? You're laughing at me?
No, I'm laughing because it's still a pulse rifle.
It's still pretty good. Okay, listen you. I've got beef with you, okay?
What did I do this time? What did I do this time?
We've had this discussion about, like... Right? We've had this discussion about Gambit and Crucible and weapons and stuff like that. And I am here to say that I believe it was like 2 a.m. Tuesday. No, it would have been Wednesday morning, 2 a.m. Tuesday night kind of thing. You freaking said in our Twitter DMs with another person in the community.
I hear the... All right, at 2:05 a.m., he said this. I enter it to the court for review.
Right. That is exactly what it is. And it's like...
Yeah, but it wasn't a pulse rifle.
No, but you were enjoying Gambit.
No, okay.
Whoa. You said it was tolerable.
Whoa.
You said it was tolerable,
let's not blow the quote out of proportion. Because I clarified that right afterwards. I said it was becoming bearable.
What? I'm going to find that chat.
I remember because I remember going back and being like, do not take this out of context. I said it was bearable.
I win. That's what I'm saying. I am taking it out of context. I win.
It's on the internet.
You enjoyed it. He enjoyed the loadout I gave him. He was enjoying the
Breakneck.
The Sentry and the Reaper.
Was that after I got Breakout, or was that when I was still chasing? I can't remember. Was that before I got Breakout?
You were still chasing it.
Whatever.
You were
whatever
chasing
the
it.
Breakneck. Whatever the
auto rifle.
Breakneck.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
That one. I don't know.
The pinnacle weapon.
The one that I hold down and things die.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The Thunderlord auto rifles.
I can agree.
I'm pulling up this freaking conversation.
I am too. Okay.
God.
I am.
Because I'm pretty sure I did not say what you're saying I said.
I'm just taking it as a win for me because you enjoyed the loadout I gave you.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care what you actually said at this point.
Blue's heart grew 3 sizes that day.
I've been trying so hard for him to like semi-enjoy himself through Gambit. And granted, I get Gambit is kind of a dumpster fire right now in some respects.
I'll tell you what, though, what really actually what did more than anything to help was I don't know, I think I tweeted it, but I just started blasting the Into the Spider-Verse soundtrack. And I don't know what it is about that soundtrack, but I am like enthralled with it. And it matched the pacing of Gambit for some reason, like the way I was playing. Mm-hmm. And so that was like a huge thing, was just getting it to a point where I was like, I'm not like cursing the entire time.
Right. It was amazing. It was like the most like heartfelt thing you've ever sent me. Of like,
I don't think that's accurate at all. Like, I think that's a little out of context too.
Green, your rebuttal.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes me sound like a complete a-hole, and that's not accurate.
You're not an a-hole.
Here it is. It says,
it's just
also have to say that chatting about Gambit playstyles, I'm finding it easier to lock into a niche. Green helped with loadouts as well, which makes it more bearable.
I still count that as a win. That is a win in my book.
Her response that's immediately, like I'm clipping this and saving it. And I'm like, and I would emphasize that I stated that this makes it more bearable, not that it is enjoyable. Just to be clear, in your clipping of something out of context.
I still count it as a win. It's a win for me. That's a win. That's a win for me.
Take what you can get.
That made my week, right? And I was wrong. I was wrong about the time. It was Monday at 8:15 p.m. So not at 2 a.m. Although Blue does send stuff to me at 2 a.m., which is
well, that was actually a reasonable one. Yeah, that was at 9 p.m.
There's another mosquito in my room. Anyway.
So yeah, now that we have that argument cleared up,
got it.
In the hot seat as guest co-host, we have our good friend InfestedPotato. Potato, how are you doing? Did you get clipped out of context by Green?
I don't think I did, but hi, I am here. I'm just the voice in the background for the last 5 minutes that's been instigating. No, I'm good. It's been a good week. A bit of a busy one, finishing up some schoolwork and some training and stuff going on. But no, overall pretty good. Was excited to get on here last minute, talking to Green today. So learned some. I just finished up reading Chronicon yesterday. I reread it today. So
nice.
Some interesting stuff going on in this book.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, and speaking of some of those fun things, Green, I think that kind of was a tie-in to your emergency question of the week.
Yeah, the emergency question, because Green, who said she was going to tweet out Thursday night, totally botched that and forgot. So I tweeted out this morning. Yeah, this morning.
Thursday Green forgot, so Friday Green had to pick it.
Yep, Friday Green had to really pick up the deal. But we had a lot of responses. Like, we had 25 responses on this, which is, for a general question, not a poll or anything like that, that's really not too bad for us. So the question of the week was, what is the one outrageous thing you'd like to see done in the story of Destiny? And the reason I say that is because of Chronicon being kind of outrageous and just outlandish in a lot of its presentations. So we had a whole slew of things. Anything from Pens wanting a coffee shop that Guardians can spend bright dust to get a good cup of coffee that we can walk around in the tower, to
only
time
if it
traveling.
makes us run faster in the tower.
I would totally.
It doesn't, but it makes you vibrate.
It makes the controller just vibrate constantly.
Yeah, like Lewis. Like Lewis.
Yeah. No, they would never do that, because people would take that out of context and use it for evil. Oh gosh. Time traveling things back to the Golden Age or multiverse, create a meaningful split between Guardians who walk the Sorrow's Road versus those who are in the Traveler's Light. Use a Well of Wishes to bring Cade back. A lot of people wanted to bring Cade back. Some people wanted to go to Twilight Gap, as implied in the Perfect Paradox lore. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can find one that was like the most crazy. Faction Wars came up a few times. Oh, Sagittite wins. Blow up Earth.
Okay.
That was probably
okay.
It's outlandish, and it would get rid of the traveler problem.
I mean, Dwyer's got a good one too. Our Guardians interacting with voice lines.
Yeah, I think he had the most likes underneath as far as responses go. Little Rabbit put, I want to see one of my characters totally out of armor in pajamas walking through the tower for a late night glass of milk. All of a sudden, boom, in towards bad guys, and I run around in just my Peregrine Greaves and nothing else. Knees for everyone, which I take that as Rabbit just sleeps in Peregrine Greaves and that's it.
I mean, for Texas.
For Texas!
Sure. For Texas! Oh my gosh.
Well, I think I remember this from D1, and I don't know who it was. There was it was a streamer who he called it his tower casual outfit or something like that. And it was, and he kept all of his armor from like when he first made the character, where you had like the really short neck scarf, and then you had like it was just like it was white, and it was all white. And every time he'd go into the tower, he would change into his tower casual guardian uniform, and he would just walk around like that. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, you just change your outfit depending on... He's like, yeah, I'm going to put on my Guardian casual uniform. It's like a little scarf. There's no hood over it. So your head's all exposed. And you're walking around with, like, essentially shorts and a T-shirt. It's essentially what it was.
Right.
It was pretty awesome.
I miss some of, like, just keep a blue around, because the blues tend to look, like, really, really small compared to your heavier gear and your purples and your or exotics. Or greens. Wear green so it looks like you're just wearing a T-shirt.
Jared Von Kell, Destiny the Musical, complete with a Hive Orchestra, Cabal heavy metal number, a Fallen chorus, and a tap dancing Vex. Zavala and Ikora could even do a duet.
What was that one?
That was Jared Von Kell.
Oh gosh. A musical version?
A musical. A Hive Orchestra, a Cabal heavy metal number, a Fallen chorus, and a tap dancing Vex. And Zavala and Ikora doing a duet.
I would not be opposed to this. I would not be opposed to this at all.
Too much,
it would be like the Buffy
too
the
much
Vampire
talks
Slayer.
of Broadway this evening.
Right? All right, Blue. Let's get out of this.
Well, as always, I know we love hearing feedback. I know Green and Potato obviously had fun curating the feedback this time. So we'll continue getting those up, and then also remember they do actually what we have it is Green will post them on Twitter, and then I have it set to automatically post in the Discord. So I know we had a couple people comment, I think today, about how they weren't on Twitter, and it's like that's why we do that, is so if you're in Discord, you'll still be able to participate and all that. So don't worry about that. Just keep an eye out. I believe we have it set to go to just the general Focus Fire chat channel. So
correct.
So be sure to sound off and let us know your thoughts when you see those things get posted. And I know everyone here is actually, I think they're a little hesitant, but I think that ultimately we are looking forward to dive into the discussion. So we're going to run through some standard intro notes, and then we'll get right into it. In our last episode of Focus Fire Chat, we discussed Calus. If you enjoy the show, please be sure to rate and, if you can, leave us a written review on iTunes or comment on the episodes on Podbean or whichever podcasting app you use to enjoy podcasts. Reviews are extremely helpful, as they not only let us know what we can do better, but help continue to expand the FFC family, which allows more and more perspectives to be heard. To those of you who have already taken the time to leave us a review, thank you. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a gathering place where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within game lore, with a special focus on the Destiny universe. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning of the new chat. Every Friday at around 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a high-level summary of the previous week's chat for those who are unable to participate. If you're a fan of lore in all its various forms, be sure to also check out thelorenetwork.com, where you can find a wide variety of some amazing content that covers a number of different titles and mediums. This will also be the home for the Focus Fire Chat episode note archives and articles going forward. Our next chat is going to be a discussion on Marcus Wren and SRL. However, as always, please be sure to weigh in on the poll this weekend to let us know which topic you will want to discuss after that. Links to that poll can be found on either Twitter at Focus Fire Chat or within the Discord server. With that being said, here's Green with a high-level summary of tonight's topic.
Recorded by Scribe... The following pages are a true and authentic publication of the incredible deeds and remarkable discoveries of the Emperor Calus, greatest emperor of the Cabal, witnessed by his most loyal allies and recorded by his most trusted scribes. Let my Chronicon be a shining beacon of truth in an age muddied by lies. Footnote. The scribe employed at this future date shall please provide additional details here as to the actual events that occurred, deaths, triumphs, courses at the banquet, and their contents shall be included to demonstrate the true majesty and greatness of the Emperor Calus. Delete this footnote upon the actualization of this history.
Before we jump into the information and thoughts the community had about the Chronicon, however, let's have a quick chat about this week's Lost Lore. All right, so for this week's Lost Lore, I wanted to actually touch on the actual meaning of Chronicon, because Chronicon is it's a term that is actually it's real, and this is something that is used. And so what we usually will see Chronicon used for is within historiography, which is a form of philosophy, and I'm going to explain that in just a second. A chronicon is a type of chronicle or annal, and these are meant to serve as a concise historical record in which events are arranged chronologically, year by year. And so that's where you get the chronicon term from. Typically, events are all recorded and treated equally, and that's what that means is that both important and significant events and just regular mundane events are all recorded with the equal level of attention to detail, because the purpose of these particular works is that it is meant to record the events that occurred as seen from the chronicler's point of view. This is not meant to be a narrative of history. That's actually something that would be later done, because the context of events and exclusion of items would not be accepted in most of these types of works. And that is because the entire goal for a chronicon or a chronicle is to create, in as much as possible, an unbiased presentation of events as they occurred, which allows others, or even the author themselves, to return to the record at a later date to review and examine without fear of bias or hidden agendas. Now, that being said, obviously that's a taller order than most people can live up to. We see that within even our own histories. Two of the more famous examples of this type of work can be seen in what's called the Panto d'Ape Historia, which is translated into Universal Histories, compiled by Eusebius of Caesarea, and that was written roughly around the early 4th century. And then also the Temporum Liber, or the Book of Times, written by St. Jerome of the Catholic Church in 380 AD. Now, both of these are they are early attempts to record the concept known simply as universal history. Universal history is an idea that aims at presenting the history of mankind as a whole coherent unit. And this was really actually, at the time that these were written, was a novel concept. Like they really had never thought about doing this. So you see, especially in the Western tradition, we will commonly see this concept. It's this idea of universal history. You see it often divided into 3 major aspects or parts. And this is so you will probably recognize these terms. You have ancient, medieval, and modern times. Ancient history is anything prior to 30,000 BC to about 400 AD, which is basically your Bronze and Iron Ages. Your medieval period is going to be anything that takes place between 400 and about 1500 AD, which is basically your early, high, and late medieval periods. And then your modern times is actually divided up quite interestingly enough. It's anything from basically the 1500s to roughly the 1950s. And so what you see here is a kind of a split between what's referred to as modern and contemporary. Modern is early and late modern periods are going to be 1500 to 1950. Contemporary period is basically anything after 1950 to the present day. So what that does is that it basically means that they give buckets that they can put events within. So it either happened in an ancient, medieval, or modern time. And this concept is bound into the roots of historiography. And like I said, historiography is a school of philosophy, and it rose within about the 19th century, and that was where it came into really big prominence. And it was focused on the idea that history written with strong connections to primary sources would allow for a more integrated and unbiased, as much as possible, big picture. So the idea of this universal history that was started back in the 4th century, early 4th century, in the 19th century actually kind of got really started. It really started to get steam. It's actually described by H.G. Wells as a concept, as something more. H.G. Wells noted universal history as something more and something less than the aggregate of the national histories which we are accustomed, and that it must be approached in a different spirit and dealt with in a different manner within his work, The Outline of History. The importance of that quote is the outline of history is actually very, very influential on what we today understand to be what a history book is. The Outline of History was actually a model that H.G. Wells, who is, you probably recognize that name from the Time Traveler. The idea, he actually was really a big proponent of universal history. And in the Outline of History, he went all the way back and tried as much as possible to connect everything that occurred within the world of humankind, the history of humankind, connected it to primary sources where he could, and he split them into these parts, ancient, medieval, and modern. And the presentation model that he used in the Outline of History would then later go on to be significantly influential in the compositions of pretty much every single history textbook that you see today. So he's kind of like one of the big focal points there. You also have thinkers such as Kant. You have Nietzsche. All of the philosophers had dabbled in historiography because they were familiar with it, because they were all philosophers, and because it also was what they used to explain their development of their own paradigms or their own hypotheses of how the world worked. So that's where you gotta get this idea of the Chronicon. Now, what's really interesting, and we're going to definitely get into this, because what's really interesting here is that's what an actual Chronicon is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a chronicle. It's supposed to be an unbiased chronicle. And we're gonna talk about this, but what the Chronicon that we see in Destiny, and it's a valid comment that a lot of people have made, is that it's anything but unbiased. And that is both reflective and separate from the way Chronicons were in history. History, you'll see a lot of histories that are written that are very complimentary of different individuals, because there's a political reason for that. And there's a bit of that in the Chronicon that we're going to talk about here as well. There's a bit of political undertow, if you will, that is going on for the people who are writing it. The scribes they're not exactly free to just write whatever they want. There is a patron of this particular Chronicon, and making sure that patron stays pleased with the information that's being contained within the book is arguably almost the same level of importance as making sure that the book is accurate. Which again, that's not something that's unique to Destiny. Most of these works were not cheap to make, and they needed patrons of nobility or noble blood. And so, if they weren't in the church, which is why Jerome's work is kind of an interesting deviation from others, they were beholden to those patrons to a degree. And so that's really the history of that term, I guess, is where I kind of want to leave it. I don't know, Green Potato, did you want to throw anything on there before?
I mean, kind of the continued thing. You were talking about how it influenced history books and how they were written and whatnot, and trying to keep primary sources as a thing. Annuals, I think, are a very modernistic way of having a Chronicon. Not necessarily a major area history a lot of times, annuals, but I know that the town I grew up in has an annual and whatnot that just depicts what happened that year. It's just a factual thing. There's no opinions. There's no nothing going on with it.
So and so got married. So and so died.
Yep.
So and so was born.
There was a flood in 19 whatever.
And those, and you know, and I know that a lot of people will like kind of scoff at that, but those are actually really important. Because when you look back at, you know, let's talk about just in American history, you look back at like the, you know, the Dust Bowl or the Great Depression, these events that just completely racked the country. And, you know, we would not know some of the stories that we know without those particular works being created by these small towns. Like that's stuff that would be lost because, I mean, in some extreme cases, the entire town died. And all that we had was the records that were left. I mean, it's not very common that happened, but I mean, but that is an example of why it's important to chronicle events and try to chronicle them, you know, exactly like what you're saying, Green, is like, you know, just being like, hey, on January 1st, so-and-so passed away. On January 2nd, you know, just like ... just as it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Not to bring this, doesn't, I don't know if she still does, or they still do it, Purple.
Mm-hmm.
Town historian.
Yeah, yep. She, and I mean, yeah, and that's when we
I
had
just
her
kind of
on.
bring up an example of somebody,
some
example of somebody we know who does.
Yeah, the one that I'm thinking, the example that was used was, oh god, it wasn't Hamilton. It was another one of the not
founding fathers.
I don't know if it was a founding father, but yeah, I mean that was the example.
Franklin had his own.
Oh, Franklin
annuals.
was a freaking. Anyways,
he has his own thing.
Yeah, Franklin is not a chronicle you want to base anything off of because it's one of the most biased pieces of. But no, like you can see that. Well, I mean, and to a degree, also knowing that it's going to be biased, it also you can take information away from it, right? I mean, anything that's written down is helpful to give even if it's fiction, it's helpful to give a tone of that time because there's influences that will allow that person to think of that. You know, Purple does mostly work with like letters to and from individuals, and you know, based on the relationship that those individuals had, you know, the letters could be accurate. They could be, they could exclude certain you know, and it was just like it's interesting to see the different ways that even back then they wrote and they communicated, even with the pen and paper, there was still communication bias back then.
Right.
And I think.
So,
I'm sorry. Go for it.
No, I was gonna say, I was like, do we know of any today that try to make attempts at predicting the future?
I mean, talk about the difference between Chronicon, the Chronicon of Destiny versus the Chronicon of real life.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sure somebody has tried to do it at some point.
I mean, you have Nostradamus, famous ones, but I mean, you even have stuff like almanacs. I mean, they're not really. It's kind of a gray area, right? It's like it's not a prediction of the future as much as it's like, hey, over the last 25 years, this is kind of when the seasons, you know, this happens.
We noted a pattern.
Yeah, the pattern seems to be this.
Well, I mean, any sort of predictive thing is based a lot. If it's got any sort of quote validity, it's based off of patterns and
some sort of scientific,
yeah.
Scientific study or
that's
analysis.
Ironically, we getting our the comic books sent out by Bungie. That makes me kind of chuckle because that's ironically the line that Osiris used in his to explain his prophecies is that it's based off patterns and it's based off like logic. It's not prophecies. It was logical like hypotheses. So yeah, actually, that's funny. But yeah, so I didn't know. I think that just was really just kind of to show that the concept of a Chronicon, it's not something that like, you know, oh hey, we're gonna make up a word for destiny. No, these things are actually like these are very prominent within even our own history and are very important to our history. They ultimately are our history.
Bungie's always been really good at tying in things that, you know, are somewhat, there's like that 1 or 2 degrees of truth to like from the Destiny universe to the real life, you know, whether that be like the music of the spheres and things along the like pulling things. Like, it's not lost on anybody, obviously, that the Curse of Osiris was very Egyptian inspired by Osiris and Anubis and all the other deities. And then you have the stuff that is obviously pulls from the Greek and Roman with the Cabal and you name it. They're very good at pulling out those little degrees of our history and putting them into Destiny to make it believable, or at least somewhat believable. I could see how that could happen.
Right. Applying
that to the lore. Yeah,
and that's what is really fun about doing some of these lost lore sections is kind of like shining a light, like click, what's that connection? So, and
definitely
we're gonna Green. I'll let you lead us into the new thing that we're doing.
So, because of how the episodes tend to be this very long intellectual thing, and teaching, the smartest thing to do is create little brain breaks so your brain can reset and refocus and focus fire onto the new item or topic of discussion. So, what Blue will be doing here in a moment is he'll be playing they're just something different. Sometimes they're little commercials, sometimes they're little things of us just being silly, but it is just something to give you entertainment before we move on to the main meat of the topic. We are all busy people. We have lives, families, and not a lot of time to dive into the things we may be curious about. Luckily, podcasts provide us a way to consume the knowledge of others in a way that doesn't interrupt our day, and isn't really all that creepy for them either. Let your friends know about your favorite podcast, and if they are a Destiny fan and you're tired of answering all their lore questions, send them to us. We don't mind breaking them in for you.
So, with that being said, an introduction to what the Chronicon within Destiny is.
Hey, so before we do that, can we just say who wrote the Chronicon, since we found out that for sure at the lore panel? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. So I don't remember, but yes, because I completely blanked
Jill
on that one.
Shaw.
Okay.
Jill
that's
Shaw
right.
wrote it.
That's right.
It was her last assignment.
It was her. Let's set the book on fire and walk out the door. Is what that was.
It's amazing.
They described it as.
She wrote the prediction. That's right. The last thing she was supposed to do was the predictions.
And so she said, "Let me set the office on fire as I leave, and drive the entire community into a tizzy." Because why not? No, I'm not. I'm not saying she did it with any malcontent or anything like that. It's just like those things that you do that you're just like, I'm going to cause some trouble.
John's explanation was she just wanted to kill everyone.
I mean, yeah, there's that, and it's just she was the pun master. She was the humor, one of the main drives of humor, of like that really dry humor. So it's just like, what better way to get out is just by throwing all your favorite characters, all the different things into just one last
meat grinder.
Little twist. Yeah, basically twist of the knife into the side. And we're going to get it into like all the different characters a little bit, that she basically just went, you're done.
And please don't take that as I'm mad at Jill or anything. I think she did an amazing job. And I just love that idea, though, of going, this is the last thing I want to work on. How do I make sure they remember me?
Oh, yeah.
I made sure the Guardian killed the Vanguard and then blew up Earth, essentially. And then I turned Halea's Basin into a theme park.
Oh yeah, to a theme park with was it wallowing pits?
Right.
Mud pits to wallow in.
Oh.
All right. So, this introduction of the topic, the summary, the high-level summary.
Mm-hmm. You want me to do it?
Does that go in this spot?
Yeah, that goes in. So, a quick introduction to the Chronicon. Calus actually explains this in one of the earlier books. I think it's actually the first entry. He says, "Let my Chronicon be a shining beacon of truth in an age muddied by lies." We'll get into I want to call it hypocrisy, I think is not too strong of a word in that statement, but we'll get into that in just a second. Basically, the Chronicon it's meant to serve as a historical archive of the Cabal Empire, with the special focus on the accomplishments of Calus. So it's not actually a historical archive of the Cabal Empire. It's a historical, I'm air quoting, historical archive of Calus's accomplishments within the Cabal Empire.
After the coup. Coup.
Right. Which then is also qualified because the tome does not actually begin until after the Midnight Coup. So it's not even actually a historical archive of the Cabal Empire or the Calus within the Cabal Empire. It's an archive of events after Calus is no longer part of the Cabal Empire, arguably thus not a historical archive of the Cabal. It's just like this entire thing.
It's an autobiography. It's a biography of his exile, essentially.
Yeah, kind of.
His version of his version of his exile.
Right.
Yeah, his version of his exile.
I mean, the thing is that Calus isn't necessarily one dictating a lot of this. It's like a love letter from the Scions to Calus to make him happy.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, like, that goes back to what I was commenting. There's aspects that
are dictated, but...
There are 2 entries that are dictated, I believe. Or one entry that's dictated, one entry that's written. And I think this kind of goes back to what I had kind of was commenting on about the actual Chronicons in reality, is you can see the play, or the give and take between the 3 scribes that we'll be introduced to here shortly, and Calus. Like, you see that very quickly in the entries. And actually, that's how we get introduced to the 3rd scribe, is because one of the scribes kind of oversteps their bounds. And so, while, Green, you are correct, Calus did not write the book. Calus definitely was a very hands-on patron within the book's creation. And so I think that's all. I mean, but that's not even that. So that aspect, I would say, is actually probably not historically inaccurate to what a Chronicon would be. The other aspects are they're not quite bald-faced lies, but they're pretty close. Because this is not a historical archive of the Empire. It's not even really an archive of Calus. It's really, like, I think, Potato, you were saying, it's like it's a biography of his life following the exile.
From his point of view.
From his point of view. Which, I mean, that's
his
fine.
Point of view.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's fine. Like, I don't really necessarily, like, because it's identified as being from his point of view, so, like, that's, from a researcher point of view, the fact that it's identified as being from a certain point of view is actually helpful, because then you're like, okay, you go into it knowing this is going to be biased, like, pretty heavily.
Right, yeah.
So that kind of brings us to the first entry. Now, the interesting thing with these entries is, very quickly, you will notice that there are missing entries. There's quite a lot of missing entries. The first entry is 1. The second entry is 578. So, we're going to take a few jumps on these.
Timeline that we keep talking about that doesn't exist.
Yeah, Dino's saying that in chat right now. We only have 2.62% of the overall book. So, that's going to be fun. And so the first entry is written by and all the scribes that we'll be mentioning here are Scions, which is, I think, something else to point out. The Scion Council is actually aboard the Leviathan. We kind of get a confirmation there. We do get a little bit of a concept of the relationship between these Scion scribes. It's not as prevalent and it's not as prominent as the relationships are described as in the Confessions, which is another entry or another lore book that we have. Because Confessions is actually written by one of these. I think is it Tlazat that writes the Confessions? Or is it Shagak? I can't remember. It's one of those two. But it's actually his like unfiltered thoughts. And so the Confessions is actually something that if you're going to read the Chronicon, I would really strongly suggest reading both of them because it kind of balances it out. Oh, Match is the author of Confessions. Thank you, Dino. All right, so entry one is basically an introduction. That's what it is. It's an introduction. It's basically Tlazat. God, I'm going to butcher this name. And he's basically writing, hey, this is the book. This is the purpose of the book. I'm just going to go through pretty high level summary unless, Green, you think do we need to dive deep into any of these?
I think the big thing with this first entry is that the writer Talzat basically says, hey, this is a history. This is going to be an accurate history. I'm going to write this down accurately. Let me tell you how accurately I'm going to write it down, kind of thing. And it's, hey, by the way, it's for our emperor who's joyful and majestic and could ride a unicorn across the sky. I mean, there's a little bit of a love letter there, but also how accurate, and this is a history. So as far as the 3 writers in this book, Zalzat is the one, as far as I am concerned, that is trying to write down a history.
I would agree with that. I would agree, because, and even then you see already a disconnect between what had, and I guess before I finish that sentence, I will go back and edit that, because the portrayal of the Midnight Coup that we had access to prior to this book was also a biased presentation. So, so the debate right now would be rather, instead of, oh, this is an outright lie, it's which one of these tellings is actually accurate. You know, like I'm personally tempted to say probably the ones that we see within the, like, I think, what was it? Was it Midnight Coup? Was that the weapon that had that had the Midnight Coup on it, or was it the sword? I can't. But like the present,
there's a gun called Midnight Coup.
Right. There's the presentation from, it's almost from Gaul's perspective, and like
it was where he killed the Congress or the senators, right?
No, the Midnight Coup was when Gaul, like, in the middle of the night, kicked Calus onto the Leviathan. And he did that because he didn't want to, because Calus was such a popular ruler because of his way of ruling, that he knew, like, Gaul and the other conspirators knew that if they executed him, like that they would normally execute someone in a military coup, that they would have a revolt on their hands, because the general populace was not on the same page as them, let's say, as far as getting rid of Calus necessarily. And so we have this presentation up until this point that it was something that was done quietly and in the night. And, you know, they were exiled onto the Leviathan before anyone really realized what was going on. Mm-hmm. However...
I'm reading the card.
Yeah, and however, on this entry, we see the Emperor speaking to people and, you know, basically being like, don't worry, I will be back. And, you know, they're like, what was it? The Empire's most loyal and joyous subjects took to the streets to lash their hides in bloody mourning.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, a great mania of aggrieved despair.
Shook with bereavement.
Yeah. The biggest thing... Go ahead.
I was just going to continue reading. Go for it, Potato.
I think one of the things that I took out of this, and this is just more kind of headcanon, not really headcanon, but just my idea of like how big and powerful the Cabal really are, is the Leviathan is a prison ship. It says in this way, the Emperor was placed upon a great prison ship called the Leviathan. Now, I don't know if that's them saying that, you know, this ship was originally intended to be a prison, or if it was
a house arrest.
It became like a prison, but the way it's written, it says it was put upon a great prison ship called the Leviathan. And then later on, I know later in the book somewhere, it says they converted the Leviathan into like a pleasure palace of kind of thing. So which makes me think it was originally a prison ship, which is terrifying to think about, that this is just a prison ship that the Cabal used.
Well, and
like,
how big are they
building?
Living.
You know?
It's also a living ship too.
Well, yeah, it kind of puts into perspective how powerful the Cabal really are or were at the height of their power. I mean, you could say that their empire's a little bit faulty or you know, kind of broken now, but at the height of their power, like how impossibly big and strong these guys were. You know, they had the Almighty, which could burn out stars, yes, but like the Leviathan eats planets, and it's a prison ship. You know, you talk about hard labor. You know, it's like
right. And it actually,
that was just something something kind of grabbed me and caught me.
No, and that's true. And actually, just to correct myself, the Midnight Coup, which I don't know if is that a hand cannon? I think that looks like a hand cannon. That is actually Calus relaying the information. So we now have 2 stories about the same event from the same person. So that's actually even something to bring up as well.
It's also just biased into the same.
But and so and there's like, and I think the question about what the Leviathan is both something that's, I don't know if we'll ever get an answer to it, because like there's also
it's not super important. Yeah, it's not super important.
There's also like the feeling that they built the Leviathan as a pleasure barge prior, and then it was turned into, like, they basically hijacked it and locked them in and then shut, like what you were saying, it was not necessarily a air quote prison ship. It was just something that it was a mobile house arrest.
He says it in the menagerie too. He says the lower levels of the menagerie were my prison. It is where all the newer tribes are tested, which makes it sound almost like a prison yard.
Okay.
You see what?
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of spinning that idea around. Like he said, the lower levels of the Leviathan were my original prison.
It's a mobile Australia.
Yeah. Oh God.
Everything's trying to kill you.
Completely understand.
Not to kind of derail us and put us onto the next card, but something I found interesting coming up is the fact that they directed it. Like when he got put on the Leviathan, he got sent in one direction, and had no control.
They were sealed
it.
From the Midnight Coup. He says, "We were sealed inside the Leviathan and ejected into the farthest reaches of space, left to the same fate I had determined for the consul so long ago. We were left to die." And you're talking, what is that, 578, which is the next card. Which, I mean, you basically, and I think this is where reading the confessions would be helpful for anyone who's just listening, because the confessions kind of fill the gap between these two cards a little bit, because we see Match is mentioning that Calus is kind of in a funk. Like Calus is not the Calus that we experience in game today. He's depressed. He's I think lethargic. Like he just doesn't want to move. He's basically defeated. And then what happens here is basically the Leviathan experiences a malfunction. We don't really know why the malfunction happens. Calus presents his personal theory as to why the malfunction occurs. Tlazat kind of has a different opinion. Which is really interesting because he actually breaks. There's actually a code break symbol, and then it says, "I, Tlazat, must break the convention of our record keeping for fear that this entry may be the last of our Chronicon Lens of Truth compendium of happiness, symbol of the lavish benevolence of His Majesty the Emperor." And then he goes on to say that basically Calus has gone out into the vacuum of space to either fix the Leviathan or see what's going on. We don't really know. And the Scions are all basically losing their minds. The council it seems is connected telepathically with him, are starting to feel pressure in their skulls. Apparently 12 of them are bleeding from their ears. The royal beasts, which are all the war beasts, not the red ones, the purple ones, they are all like basically just going insane in their kennels. And Tlazat basically goes on to say that he can't even write. He can't even hold the instrument to write. So he is going to write with his mind until he is incapacitated. And then he goes on to say, "We are afraid. We fear that our enemies have sent us to this place to die in the dark, far from the eyes of Calus's adoring public. The Emperor has not returned and is surely dead." So this is kind of that's the end of the entry. So it's kind of like a cliffhanger, if you will. If this was a TV show, that would be the last scene. But yeah,
anyone else kind
of go for it.
Nope. I was like, anyone else kind of get the vibe of the Exodus? Oh my God, what's the name of the Exodus ship that Mara was on?
Exodus Green,
the one that Mara was on. Yeah, the
Yang Li
Wei. Like not so much the lightness and the darkness meeting, creating the singularity kind of thing, but just that when the Yang Li Wei first encounters what we assume to be the darkness, or like the approaching darkness and things like that, and they said it was like there was that signal, or it was a pressure in their head, like they were being scanned, like they couldn't like understand it. It was like they said their heads hurt and that there was people screaming and they just couldn't apprehend it. It's like it almost feels like that.
Yeah,
it's it's the approaching darkness kind of thing.
I think this whole card screams Maracena. So I think it is, if most of this is considered, and Blue made the comment earlier about the world muddled with lies, if this is similar in so much that it is his propaganda, his whole thing. This whole card could be literally just a straight up copy of what happened to the queen, because we've never heard of any other going out in a pressure suit like that, out to hang out in the outside of the ship type thing. That is literally what Mara did as for fun. The whole pressure and everything that you were talking about that happened with Yang Liwei when the darkness or whatever came around, it screams and harkens back to that other book. So it's one of those things, like, it's almost so overt that I'm like, I don't believe that's necessarily what happened, but it may have been. It's just very weird that would have been what happened.
Because it almost seems like when Blue said there was a code break and Talzot, it's like Talzot is breaking from ranks and he's saying, this is what I actually think this is what is actually happening. And then the thing above it is what the Emperor wants you to read. And so that's where I just get that idea that, like, this is them, like Blue said, freaking out because this intergalactic death essentially is coming at them.
Right. And I think that's accurate too.
Yeah. And Calus is like, no, I approached it, on my own because that's who I am. And Talzot's like, no, we're freaking out down here. Like, it's going crazy.
Right. And I think, and Wicked actually just said what I'm also thinking kind of too is a possibility, is that the other possibility, and this is how far do we want to split the hair, right? Is what the other possibility is that Calus actually left that break in there to also replicate other legends that we know of, such as Mara's, to kind of assimilate that sense into his own. Because the thing that makes it really hard to determine the validity, like one of the things that makes it hard to determine the validity of this particular Chronicon, is we don't know when exactly these things were written. We don't know, like a normal Chronicon or a normal chronicle would be written, pretty close to the event itself. Like it's not necessarily the time of the event, but it's like, hey, this is this week's thing, and adds it to the chronicle. Is kind of the idea behind it. Go for it.
Think about how conquering empires work. They assimilate, if they're wanting to bring in people into their fold, they assimilate the stories and legends of others.
Right. So no, that's what I mean though, is that I think if you see it as, but that's what I'm saying, is like, if this was written after he encountered the Awoken, then we have a completely different assimilation tactic than if this is actually written, the day of the experience.
How far, because of the time difference between 1 and 578, we have no idea how far time-wise there is. So it would be interesting to know if he had seen the Awoken by then, or if literally he did run into something very similar to what Mara ran into. We just don't have a exact pointing direction, as we don't have it with any of the timeline things in Destiny.
Right.
Dino just made a good point. It's basically 1984.
Yeah.
Write the history if things don't happen as the history Big Brother is. Yeah.
Right, and that's what we see. That's what we will see later in the Chronicon with the footnotes left by the scribes. Right, is that
it says delete this when it does happen,
or edit this when it does happen to make sure it's accurate. Which I kind of go back and forth, because even that particular, like, I don't know. I have my own thoughts on that, because I don't necessarily want to say that's not necessarily a. I don't know. I think, like, I can see someone in reality doing something similar to that, because there's an idea of, like, this is what we should look for, and all that. But then I would argue that's where my point of conflict comes in, because that's not a Chronicon. Then that's a biography, and that's a vastly different type of nonfiction than what a Chronicon should be. Black flag. So do we want to jump to, I believe it's 579, right? Is the next one. So we jumped 576 pages. Now we're going to jump right to the next page.
I mean, it's kind of important.
Yeah, they left us on a cliffhanger, right? One. I mean, you always have to watch the next episode. That's how Netflix gets you.
Are you still watching?
Yeah. Are you still watching? Are you still alive?
Go outside.
So basically, this is again, I don't even know, T. He is still mentally writing, and he says that basically after 12 hours of tremors, violent tremors, the Emperor returns from his jaunt through space, and I love this. His behavior was erratic, and it appeared from his speech that he had suffered hallucinations outside the ship. A royal mechanic identified a malfunction in the pressure gauge on the Emperor's suit, perhaps explaining his change in demeanor, though it was incredible that his suit, or he himself, should be at all intact after 12 hours in these unfathomable conditions. Upon returning, and with a look of mania in his eyes, the Emperor proclaimed the following: "We have come upon the end of the world, and I've stared into its expanse. It has whispered into my ear, and I am enlightened. Death is coming, and it has made me its herald. The end will eat everything."
There's that food thing again.
He's a doomsayer.
I just love the fact that this scribe is just like, you're crazy. Like you've lost it. Like this is probably the only entry that I could probably with a modicum of some validity say that it's not necessarily biased, or it's biased, but it's not necessarily Calus's bias.
Right.
Now, a sudden image in my head of Calus wearing one of those like signs that says "The end is nigh."
The end is nigh.
Yeah, he's a doomsayer.
Now, the counter argument for that is that, given what's going to happen in the next entry, if this had not been to Calus's purview, I would also expect this to be purged from the Chronicon. So the fact that it's still in the Chronicon begs if there's not a larger agenda going on there. Which,
or just the sudden disappearance of that writer.
Well, but that's what I mean is like, so the scribe.
That's what this would
the scribe disappears,
right.
But this entry is still present in the Chronicon. So if he
this is like the explanation. It depicts the traitorous action, and if we're going to just we're tiptoeing around it, but Salzat is branded a traitor and is executed and is replaced by Shagak.
We don't know if I don't know if we know that he's replaced by Shagak. Because I don't think it says that he's. We'll get there in just a second. Shagak is basically Tazalt's understudy. If that makes sense, or apprentice. I think understudy would be the right one. And so he's like the guy who's like in the wings, basically, learning from the master, if you will. And so Tazalt finishes this. I don't even know. I don't know why I keep trying to say this guy's name. He finishes this entry. And then the next entry is, I believe it jumps again to... Oh, no, we jump a couple.
602.
Yeah, we jump to 602.
602.
Green's our Roman numeral reader.
Also, you put them numbers in the
Oh, yeah, I did, didn't I? I'm actually sitting on the actual entry, so I'm like, how are you reading these? So you're a genius.
Well, I was also that, but sure.
Sorry.
You
take
can't
what you can
see
get.
it, but
Take
I'm
what you can
dusting
get.
off.
I know. I hear the shoulder like. So 602 is where we all of a sudden have a new scribe writing, and the first thing that's said is, whereas the writings of Scribe Talzat revealed a treasonous mistrust for a great emperor, and whereas his traitorous actions resulted in a falseness writ into our records unknowingly, therefore the scribe Shagak shall rightly replace him as royal historian, alongside scribe Ixalt, by order of the emperor himself. Let truth alone shine through these records, not personal bias or failure. I'm just...
that was just Green smelling the BS right there.
It's me coughing without actually saying the things I want to say.
It's the BS sensor going like haywire.
Yeah.
But so
all the red flags went up at the same time.
Yeah, I know. I can't think.
Hold on a second.
The legion of red flags is going up. So he said, and this entry is basically Shagak, air quote, correcting the record. He says that the great revelation, so we have the first reference to this vision. The great revelation was not a hallucination induced by a malfunctioning suit. I'm sorry, I have to put like the snark in this. Is by a malfunctioning suit, and such a suggestion is akin to treason, punishable with death by boiling. Number 2 was the expand.
That's why I said,
Yeah,
by
yeah,
the way, that's why I said that he was killed.
I can see that, right. Number 2, the expansion of the prison ship Leviathan into a great palace of pleasure was an edict supported by all of Calus's loyalists, save for the traitor Torobatl. And number 3, the shadows of the Clips, the Sindhu, and the Arkborn represent the greatest, most skilled of their kind, handpicked by Calus himself, and were chosen not for any petty or personal aim, but for a greater cosmic need, to help our great emperor usher in the end of times.
So this one I find interesting because did we have any mention of those before?
We did not. We did not. So this is where we kind of...
This is
go for it. Sorry.
Like 2 additional races.
It's kind of a clarification of, no, I didn't force these individuals into essentially indentured slavehood to further my own gains, but they chose because they were the best, and I chose them because they were the best, and I have the best people working for me.
The funny thing is we also know from Calus's own lips that that's not true.
Correct.
Well, also too. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I was just going to say those three in particular were all manipulated by Calus.
Forced.
Like the Sindhu is Jairus. He's the ace pilot. Arkborn was the fulminator who joined because Calus threatened her people, and Clips was Rule, who was the last standing member of the basically the assassination squad that tried to kill Calus after Calus came and threatened their world with the Leviathan. So sorry, Potato. What were you going to say?
No. It is the Arkborn are still on the Leviathan.
No.
In the menagerie, he says, "I have Arkborn." I think he says something along the lines of, "The Arkborn are trapped on this ship, still caught in the currents of the ship."
Because remember, the Arkborn, as far as quote unquote dying, basically just got outside of the suit and just went all over the place. Exploded all over the place. The other thing is, in the raid itself, we go into an area, the Arkborn area.
Interesting.
I would love to know if that... Yeah.
And this also kind of raises the question, did the shadows exist before he was exiled?
No.
Or were the shadows a result of the exile?
I think the shadows were...
Or after he had this encounter with the supposed... Dog.
Yes. That's what I have kind of always felt that, because if you follow the progress of events, right, regardless of the discrepancies that we have in the explanations of the details, the progression is the same. He's exiled. He's put on the Leviathan. When he gets put on the Leviathan, he has no control of the Leviathan. It is out of his control. It's not until it hits the malfunction that he gets control back from the Leviathan. Well, that's right when he sees the vision. So then he has either the hallucination, the vision, whatever you want to refer to it. But then we also know that in order to get the shadows, he shows up on the Leviathan. Like all the shadows, when they come to him, like the different entries that we have of the shadows coming to him, they're all present on the Leviathan. So the Leviathan is like a central point to the story of the shadows of Calus. And in order for that to happen, he has to have control of the Leviathan, which ergo would be after he goes through the malfunction.
Which, if I read 2 paragraphs down, I would have seen. My beloved shadows represent everything that was lost to me when the Red Legion took Torobatl.
Oh, yeah. That too. That's where I was going. Little did you know.
The Empire.
Yeah.
Totally planned.
Totally answered my own question by reading 2 paragraphs down.
It's amazing. What does the lore say?
Yeah.
So the next entry talks about his disposal of said shadows. He ruined the batch. He spoiled the whole batch.
Oh, okay. So Dino is our resident quote collector. He says these are a couple of the quotes from the menagerie. He says, "My counselors wrested only a fraction of the Arkborn free of their world. Together you and I could take them all." And then another one is, the Arkborn, sentient energy crackling with potential, and the Fulminator was the brightest of them all. And then finally, there are captive Arkborn all around you. Bathe in them. Dab their essence behind your ears.
That's from the menagerie. That's one of the events from the menagerie.
Interesting. But what that also tells me is that he lied to the Fulminator then.
Well, I mean, he's not beyond lying.
Well, I realize this. I realize this, but it just is interesting because like the deal that he made with the Fulminator was that he would leave her people alone inside their conduits. Which I guess if they're... Okay, maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking... Sorry, I just pulled a potato.
Thank you.
Anytime. All right, so anyways, Green.
After the fall of his shadows, the great Emperor Calus, master of the celebrations, patron of festivity, stood in the throne room of his great ship. The Golden King's shining mottled brow was furrowed with
Malted.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gross.
Yep, deep melancholy, and the beauty of his face was marred by a frown. Dominus Gaul, the Ghost Primus, the usurper, lived, while the mightiest of his shadows, his chosen killers, his Zenith champions, were dead. Anyway, so basically, Calus gets pretty upset because the foremost of his shadows die, and then he gets depressed and says he's ruined the whole batch, and basically throws a temper tantrum. He
kills them all.
And he kills them all. He's got all their shadows. He just it's a toddler. Calus is a giant toddler in a diaper.
I mean, you're
Golden
not wrong.
diaper.
Have you not seen? Did you not? Were you following the Destiny artists when they did the parody of Calus back when we first saw him? And I'm the baby. Not the mama. The other thing too is that I also want to point out is that this is also where we start getting a little bit more concrete idea of where in the time of the timeline that we have, or that we do know about, where within that we're starting to find this is occurring.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're still not 100% sure exactly when this particular assassination attempt was taken on Gaul, but we do know that we kind of have the idea that it was pretty close to about the time that he was coming to us. And then I think it's the next entry is when he comes out of his tantrum, and that is 702. And
Jumping all over.
yeah.
A little bit.
Shigak is really bad at hole punching things, I guess.
Apparently.
I don't know why. I don't know why I had this random image of them being like, I don't know how to work. Anyways,
there's a poor scion buried at the bottom of the Leviathan.
You took my purple stapler?
Oh Lord!
So I'm gonna burning this to the ground. Now we know why the Leviathan got a tummy ache. And so 702 is where Calus learns of Gaul's death. And also he learns, he doesn't learn necessarily, but he becomes more interested in the Guardian tribe.
The hero. Yes. So
sorry, Dido. They don't know how to hole punch because they only know how to foist work on the underscribe.
Yeah, because it's like being, what is it called when there's a professor,
student
and
intern.
then,
Oh, it's a student teacher.
Yeah. Gosh, all the jokes,
It's so accurate,
all right,
though.
It kind of is. So Gaul is upset in this a little bit still. He's got his advisors around. They're trying to figure out how to calm him down. And then he is told about Gaul's death. Gaul has risen above his own past. That at least is admirable. Do you think, after all I've seen, I am heartbroken by such a tiny thing as failure? No, I am weary. And he continues, he's like, I have combed this whole universe for someone who truly merits a seat at my table. Just one creature who might partially comprehend the gravity of my mission. One creature brave enough to test their might and their mind on me. One creature worthy of sipping on my perfect flesh. Gross, by the way. And I have not found them. Yeah, right? So the thing I love is the very next line is all of his advisors are cringing. Like, really? What?
No, they're not cringing. They're all throwing up. It's just what they're doing. They heard the supple, supping my perfect flesh, and they all went bleh at the same time. That's what they're cringing about.
Either that or they're jealous or upset that they're not the ones that could be there.
Oh my god, it is. You read it in such a perfect way, though, is that if we could drop your voice by like 6 octaves, we could just record that and have you be Calus.
I would totally be Calus. We can make Calus female. It's fine. Gender bend him a bit.
There you go. It is. I have his voice in my head that I have combed this whole universe. I have combed this. He has that deep bravado to voice, and I imagine him just sitting there going, "Sad Calus." That's all I hear in my head. Calus.
Mm-hmm. But then he is told about the hero of Earth, and they set a course for the Sol System. And yeah, he's excited. He wants to find us. He wants to interact with us because we basically did the one thing that his other shadows that he killed because he spoiled the batch could not do.
We're not going to talk about the really awkward ending of this entry.
Yep, I'm passing over it.
Okay.
No. I made notes of this one when I read. No, we're not skipping over this. Hold on. I wrote down a bunch of notes about this. In very big letters in my notes. I went, Calus is. I went, and when I originally started reading, I was like, okay, Calus is full of himself. And then I finished reading this card. I said, Calus is very full of himself. The robots were so he could watch himself.
In many
problem.
unique situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Gotta love me.
The Emperor did not specify why the automaton should be prepared. This is Jill dumping gasoline on a fire and throwing a match into the room.
But there was such joy in his voice.
Yeah,
they wanted to nope out of there. They wanted to nope out of there.
Yeah, it's like the octopus just
nope. We're gone. We're done. It's just
oh my gosh.
The automatons, the robotic creations made in the likeness of the great emperor, were built so that his joyful majesty might be able to watch him. What's it from Thor Ragnarok? The guy on played by Jeff Goldblum.
Oh, the collector.
That guy. No, not the collector. He's like the master of the planet or whatever it is. This is what I imagine is going on in that guy's head. Yeah, it's my birthday. Yeah, he's
Grandmaster. That's right. The collector was.
Thank you.
Collector was Nowhere. Was the collector?
Yeah, he was in Nowhere.
He had the duck. Howard the Duck. All right.
Oh my God. Moving on from that.
There is actually a serious theory there too. Is because we'll later hear that Calus has not been seen. And so there's a theory.
Yes.
There's a theory.
Yeah. Isn't that in Confessions?
Yeah, I believe. I think it's mentioned
book?
in here as well. But it is mostly in Confessions because it's Match is like the person or the scion that he has really. It's kind of like one of his closest confidants, and so Match is like, I haven't seen him in a long time, and so then we start getting the idea that Calus might not. Be bound any longer to this physical realm in the way that most of us understand. And so the automatons could have been basically shells for him to inhabit, similar to what we see with him and Benedict, how he kind of possesses Benedict to communicate with us during the quest. So there is all joking aside for 30 seconds there, is a serious theory that would explain what's going on here, but I also just can't help but giggle because it's just messed up. Mirrors on the ceiling do not mean a good thing. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Sorry. Space Rhino mirrors. No, I'm not doing that. No, but it would kind of explain too, where he claps during the raid mechanic where he claps and you're transported to that like shadow realm,
the nightmare realm
looking thing,
right? Yeah,
the nightmare realm where there's a giant visage of him and it's a giant head of him. If he was out there, communing with the darkness and talking with them, and the darkness is these pyramid ships, or at least they're like a representation of the manifestation of the darkness, or however you want to spin that. They obviously have some sort of control similar to that of the light, where they can jump between dimensions. There's like, the seams between reality are very thin, as the Dreaming City likes to say a lot when you're in there. And so Yeah, I mean, it can very much see his ability to be like, hey, I'm just going to possess this robot for 5 minutes.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I mean, that seems to be...
That's how I'm interacting with you.
Right, because that is what he does with Benedict, right? Is like that's when you see the eye, the eye changes from red to purple, and Calus speaks through Benedict, and then it turns back, and like Benedict's like,
I don't know what happened. Help me.
I feel dirty. All right, so
we all feel dirty right now.
We're all very uncomfortable. 789 is one of the items that we actually mentioned. This is actually a letter that was dictated by Calus, but was recorded by Ixalt, which is actually another Roman practice. It's actually a lot of ancient and medieval times. They would do this. The individual who was actually quote unquote writing the letter would speak, and they would have a scribe who would write it for them, so they could dictate and basically do multitask. They can multitask while they're doing this. So this is another kind of callback to that tradition of history. The other thing is that it is called out that this is an unsent letter to the hero of the Guardian tribe. So he wrote it and never sent it. It was also... It is also another confirmation on time, because this was following the initial raid, because he calls out the fact that we boarded the Leviathan the first time and shot the cup from his automaton's hand.
I love that callback. I love that little callback.
Oh yeah, and
interestingly enough, this letter happens very, very much so after we get the invitation letter from the...
I just pulled another potato. I was just about to say that. Yeah, if I had kept reading, that would have been...
Yeah, that's after the Leviathan raid. It's after everything with this very last raid that we got, because we slay Galron. Yep.
He's ensnared by us.
Mm-hmm. That he is creepy.
The quote here,
he's like Valentine's
a
Day stalker creepy. Like,
he needs to register.
He's on
He
Predator
needs to
list.
register with the solar system so that we know that he is not allowed within 50 light years of our planet.
Of a planet, not just Earth, any planet in the solar system.
Sorry, the end quote.
You can come up to Nessus, and since it's not technically a planetoid, you can stay there, but beyond that, you can get no closer.
So he said...
Only when it comes into the solar system, every 1,000 years or so.
He says, that day you gallantly slew Galran, golden chalice in hand. That was the day I truly knew we were meant to be together. I am ensnared by you, Guardian. I wish to possess you as my own until the end of existence.
I mean,
I've seen this
Mr.
movie.
Pleasure Man. Oh yeah, I think many of us have seen this movie.
It doesn't end well.
No, it doesn't.
I love Dino's quote from Hawthorne. When guys like Calus hit on me, I show him the business end of my shotgun. But you do you, I guess.
So everything that we're getting past this in the entries are predictions?
Yeah, so everything...
Yeah, this is when we go from actual happening to maybe kind of sort of will happen.
Right.
Them trying to predict the future.
As far as some of the prior entries, there have been some with cliff notes at the bottom, but not... Well, let me look through this. There are none with cliff notes at the bottom, or footnotes. So this is the beginning of where we're going to get those footnotes.
This is where the side conversations start happening.
The scribe employed at this future date shall please provide additional details here as to the number of courses at the banquet and their contents. Delete this footnote upon the actualization of this history, which happens a few different times, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That little entry.
It's basically them kind of like waxing poetic about the things that they've been told by Calus are going to happen. And because there's that great revelation, right? It's the whole prophecies of Calus. And you kind of get the idea that they're like, okay, well, we're going to write these, but then they kind of are like making little footnotes. They're literally making footnotes that are saying, hey, if I'm not here in the future, which given what we just finished talking about the first 3 entries, it's entirely possible they're going to be cooked in a vat of gold or something.
Boiled.
Yeah, they're like, if we're not here
this is where you need to make the edits.
Was there chicken or was there crab?
Yeah, that's one
That
of
is,
the
yeah,
things,
that
like,
is actually, yeah. The third course that was served while the Emperor's psionic dancers performed a celebratory ribbon dance.
Well, yeah, it's and it's kind of like when you look through these next couple of entries, it's almost like they're trying to predict different, like, what's going to happen. This could be, there's like a bunch of different predictions of what could happen. But I see this more as like they see this as this is what the timeline is saying.
Right.
Like this is exactly what this timeline is going to say. Not like, oh, it could be this or it could be that or it could be this. It's literally, this is the timeline of the future. This is exactly what will happen. And if it doesn't happen in an exact way, somebody makes some edits.
Yeah, and I just really appreciate that we have a master of rhyme who's spitting some sick beats in the honor of the Shadow of Shadows.
Oh, this was another note I made. The Leviathan has a performance. Hang on, no. The Leviathan has a performance troupe.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I had to back up on that one. I was like, wait. There's some poor centurion with some like giant winged armor. Like I just have this image of him like doing, what is it? Yeah.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that very, was it Roman?
Yeah, the gladiatorial
Roman plays and everything.
Gladiatorial death camp.
And the fact that at the end of the performance, the actual performer is killed.
Well, what they would do is they would perform re-encounters of not just plays, but like a lot of the tragedies. But
Battles
the actors would be gladiators or slaves, and instead of pretending to die, they would actually kill each other on the stage. Yes. within like the Colosseum and other gladiatorial arenas, and it was as entertainment. It was actually done usually over like the lunch hour, because they would allow the citizenry to kind of come in with their food and watch a show and get entertained, and then be entertained with an actual death at the end, just because they were being so nice to their citizens.
The creepiest part of this whole entry, though, is the fact that our guardian is enjoying it.
Well,
according to the
predictions, yeah.
Yeah, it's Calus saying.
Well, and it gets creepier.
We have completely accepted the throes of his benevolent love, and
we are supping upon his. Never mind. Anyways, I hear potato in the background.
I'm gonna veto that right now. Just it's gonna be a no for me, dog.
I was gonna take a bite of chocolate, and I set it back down. That was terrible.
Well, what is it? Yeah, you represent the dawning of a new era, the last era before the end. I will have you at my side as this petty world meets death.
Yep.
And I'm like, so he loves Earth, but at the same time, he's like, yeah, it's gonna burn, bro. Like,
well, and that's kind of,
and we see that coming up,
right?
too.
And that's also the fundamental aspect of his philosophy, right? And you see that right above that is like, he says, we will remind all beings nothing else exists aside from this moment, and so no one must strive to live in a state of rapture, to minimize pain, to maximize delight, to let go of the ideologies that tie us down. It's a very hedonistic philosophy, but in the light of what he believes to be happening, it actually kind of makes sense. He's like, no,
right.
You don't have a future. The future.
Might as well live.
Yeah, the future is set. You are going to die. And it's not like you're going to die a natural death. Like, you're going to be killed very soon, and so you need to maximize your delight now.
Yeah, it's the live while you can mentality.
It's very reminiscent of a Warhammer reference here of the chaos god Slanesh, who's the god of hedonistic things, like living for pleasure, like essentially strictly for pleasure, because doing so will bring you greater glory, and eventually you're going to die anyway, so you want pleasure. And so when I was reading that and listening to him talk about, living in pleasure every day, live now because death is coming. It just reminds the kind of the ties there with the chaos gods and things like that. So,
right.
And the chaos gods in Warhammer are essentially death and evil, and not necessarily evil, but they are the chaotic undersides of order, obvious forces of chaos. But it just, I just a little side note, and I remember I wrote down. So sorry.
No. That's an accurate, I think, a good way to explain it too. And we see that a little bit also within the next one, right? With what is it, 1112. This is where so he's already eradicated his old shadows, and he has taken on the, quote, shadow of shadows, or the shadow of earth, which is our guardian. And it is here that he tells our guardian, the shadow of shadows, to go forth and gather a new army of shadows. And kind of to what you were just saying, Potato, is he says, choose only the most beautiful, the most devoted, the most joyful, the most skilled. And so
it's Slanesh in an image right there.
It's time to recruit new troops. And it's familiar faces. We start with Rax.
Dino's having a heart attack.
Yeah. There's a couple of, and I mean that goes back to, right, your guys' comment about our guardian is mysteriously kind of enjoying this. Dino had made that point earlier too. Is like, we're a self-insert. We are not ourselves. We are basically a way for Calus to tell his story. Like, that's what we are. We're I don't want to say a Mary Sue, but we're kind of like that. And that's kind of just, that's what he's using our figure for. But yeah, and so we have, at the latter part of this was the Shadow of Earth set out on a quest of, basically finding the army of shadows, and we encounter, and this is where we have Mithrax, which you guys were just talking about, who we promptly took on as a protege. And then with Mithrax, we eliminated the Elixni, who remained loyal. So Damo is completely not supporting this, I can tell you right now. And then Mithrax and the Shadow of Earth went to Marasov, who styled herself, Shipbreaker was the title that she gave herself. As anticipated by both the Emperor and his shadow, Marasov rejected the author of peace, and so the Shadow of Earth killed her on her throne, which then led to Petra joining the Shadow of Earth and swearing fealty to Calus, because that's totally going to happen. Let's just talk about that for 2 seconds. If you kill Mara on her throne, Petra is just totally just going to join you and swear fealty to the guy who told you to do that. I totally see that happening.
Petra would jump off of an asteroid at the Leviathan with just her knife before doing that.
It's like,
and she would ding off the side of it.
There's a lot of things
away.
that I could see Petra being able to stomach. This is not one of them at all.
The fire of 1,000 suns would burn the Leviathan if Petra would never ever do that. If she is as loyal as they come when it comes to being loyal to Mara, and just every time you walk into her and talk to her in the Dreaming City, she's like, the Queen knows what she's doing. The Queen knows what she's doing. We haven't seen the Queen in weeks, but we know what the Queen is doing.
Right.
She's.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, is that's why she's the Wrath, right? I mean, that's
right.
that's the aspect here. And again, we kind of see these forthcoming is what they call them, is this next one is, I think it's 11-17 forthcoming, and this is the entry where, so we've recruited Mithrax and destroyed the Elixni. We've recruited Petra and eradicated the false awoken who are no longer whatever. And now we have a formidable team of allies in the shadows. So multiple Elixni and Awoken have actually also come into this mysterious shadow army, and they basically are led to reclaim one of the Athenaeum worlds. Which we had talked, we had talked about what an Athenaeum was way back when we first talked about Calus. But it's basically various various points of interest and locus of knowledge and power within an empire. And so this is World X or World 10, which is interesting. I have a weird spin foil about that particular naming convention, but that I'll get to in just a second. But this particular planet was a repository for what's referred to as precious ancient knowledge collected by the Emperor. It was chosen for its hostile environment, which served as a built-in defense system from intruders and thieves. I believe this is also the one that Ixult gets called out on. Yeah, later down. Because basically, so he goes on to, Ixult goes on to, he's explaining all the cool gadgets they get and, all this stuff. And this is where also supposedly Mithrax is going to fall. And then the Shadows of Earth and the Awoken were able to access the Inner Sanctum, revealing hundreds of years of lost knowledge, which was reclaimed for the great Emperor Calus and his loyalists. This is where you get the footnote. The scribe employed at this future date shall include additional details here when the lost secrets of this and other Athenaeum worlds are recovered. Delete this footnote upon the actualization of this history. But really quick, the connection that I find myself keep coming back to, World X, is the initial name for the Traveler, was Moon X.
Yeah.
So there's like, I don't know if that, I find it hard to say things aren't intentional with Bungie at times. And so like, there's that thing, but then there's also the thing of like, if this is total just bunk, okay. What's the validity there other than he could be assimilating that information in? But I did find that particularly kind of an interesting little side note for this one.
In this card, too, it says the Shadows were stalked by undocumented wildlife whose natural capabilities as a predator proved unexpectedly debilitating to the companion soul of the Shadow of Earth. And this is just, obviously spinfoil kind of headcanon. It almost kind of reminds me of the creatures that Drifter ran into.
Yeah, that's Dino. Dino saying that right now. Is the cold?
Is that what he's saying? Sorry, I had the chat.
No, you're fine. He says a cold planet with the local fauna messed with ghosts, and the description was very similar. Like you have the right built-in defense system, and for intruders and thieves. Who would we know that fits that bill?
And the Drifter knows about Athenaeum worlds.
That's true.
So because he says it at the beginning of the Gambit matches, the Cabal, they have these great things of knowledge on Athenaeum world. He might have been on one and not even realized it.
Right.
And so that's just kind of that. I was sitting there kind of thinking about that. I love that they executed a stealth attack, thus began a bloody battle where the three shadows fought back half a dozen creatures with modest success. I just like the way that's written, with modest. Yeah, they did all right. They didn't do great. They did all right. Yeah, that kind of caught my eye.
Let's see, and then we have, what is it next? Is 1120 is the next forthcoming one.
Rasputin and Vanguard. This one's interesting.
Oh yeah, that's right. This is the Rasputin and Vanguard one. So following the Athenaeum world, Green, do you want to?
So there's a whole essentially argument that the Vanguard come out and they're mad about the whole thing. Essentially hold court in some respects with Calus and the Shadow of Earth. And our Shadow of Earth gets really mad at them. They basically throws down the gauntlet. Who do you think I am? Without me, you have only a dwindling army of ambivalent soldiers. I am the young wolf. By the way, side note, is that the first mention of young wolf in D2?
Yeah, because Saladin sure as hell forgot.
No, it's not.
It feels like it.
Might
feels
be,
like Saladin forgot.
It feels
might
like
be,
it.
but I'm pretty sure it's not. I think there's. I'd have to look longer than I have to find it.
Cade calls us.
Cade mentions it, and I think
still
that
calls you Wolfie or something like that.
I think Shax mentioned it as well, like in the very opening.
Does he?
Yeah. Black
Shax
Flag. Black Flag. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because when he's pulling the door open and he's stolen your sword back. Like, I love that little thought there.
Yeah,
he says it at the very beginning of the cutscene when he lets you go through.
Yeah.
Because that's when he gives you the armory, right? Yeah. Dino and Black Flag are talking about. Okay.
And this is where I start, because we're going to see later on there's going to be a card that I just noped out on, and I was like, this is starting getting sneaky. Is I broke the curse.
Mm-hmm.
And
I broke the houses. I killed the queen.
Yeah. It was that I broke the curse thing, which I know this is supposed to be like, a predictive future, but I broke the curse is way too much of a it's too small. You think that breaking the curse would have been something they talked about. I killed the Taken King, I defeated Gaul, I roused the Traveler, I silenced the Moon, I stopped the invasion. First of all, are they talking about the invasion of Crota coming from the Moon, or what invasion? And then I broke the curse.
Maybe the curse is tied to Mars.
And see how, because I stopped the invasion is before I broke the curse. And that to me is sitting there going, this seems way too, that's way too important to just be a footnote of our Guardian getting pissed off at the Vanguard. And
again, it's predictive propaganda at this point. We don't know if this is has any sort of accuracy built into it whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's just that to me right there was like, I was like, who? Like, you stopped an invasion. What invasion? You broke what curse? Or not what curse, but how did you break the curse? Because what's coming up in the next few cards makes it even more suspicious. Again, that's just my headcanon.
Mm-hmm. Note about this card, the Vanguard are allowed to leave. They're not killed, which is kind of a departure from the normal things in these cards. Like, normally if anybody stands in his way, he just gets rid of them. But the Vanguard are allowed to leave. And then we find out later that Rasputin was destroyed, essentially. And that happens with the renewed ships of the Loyalist fleet. The Shadow of Earth led an attack on the War Machine's seat of power, War Machine being Rasputin, the region of Hellas Basin on the planet Mars. The battle was much less a war than a single unmatched attack that left the War Machine Rasputin in cinders. It was at this time that the Vanguard of Earth surrendered and begged for mercy, a request which was denied by the Shadow of Earth. So, no exact... I mean, they got to lead the Leviathan, but no reprieve exactly for them.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
We also get mention of the Aphelion.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Which had the power to devastate whole worlds in the blink of an eye.
Aphelion?
Aphelion.
Yeah. Which is the name of that lost sector in week 2 on... Correct. Aphelion's Rest, week 2 of the curse. All right,
it's also
so
the
next
predator that was hunting Awoken.
Yes. Yep.
So, but yes. So next we have what's up next.
Let's see here. This is 1,125, and this one is
one. And this is where I noped out.
Yeah.
Savathun.
Yep.
There's a lot of theories on this.
Why? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to let you two take this one because this one makes my head hurt because anything Savathun related just gives me a headache at this point.
The other fun part about this one is that Dino's calling this. Ixalt calls out Shagak, being basically like, you can't just make stuff up. It's like...
Yeah, the note at the bottom.
I love it. This is where they start like bickering at each other, and it's the best thing ever. Like I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. Yeah. So like the problem here is like, so they had nearly conquered the system, and basically the Leviathan does the same thing that he kind of did with Argus, and well, it was just Argus. He kind of like the Leviathan it's rocked by a great disturbance. They don't know what's going on. Royal mechanics reported that in the inner rooms of the ship, a strange rift had opened, and from it came the acrid stench of hive ritual pyres. And here you are introduced to this voice that says, I am Savathun and I am death. And so basically Savathun splits something open and does a direct assault, which is very interesting because that's the last thing that she would normally do. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because the voice that is identified as Savathun then goes on to say, while this coward invents his histories and futures, I wait. These messages are my gift to you. So
that to me is Savathun breaking I'm going to say the fourth wall, but the fourth wall of like the
Chronicon
that Calus is trying to spin. And she's going, I'm still here. I'm coming for you. This is me. I am doing this.
So yeah, Dino beat me to it. She graffitied the Chronicon now as well. So she's graffitied all the books that we have so far.
Just as she did in the Book of Sorrow, yeah.
She's just gonna note this right here. This book is full of lies.
And the fact that she says, I am death. What does Calus says he's ran into? He ran into death.
Right, that's true.
He did run into death.
And so is this Savathun? Is this him running into the darkness, or was this him running into Savathun back when he ran into whatever that is that met the Leviathan?
He talked to
Savathun.
Go to the next line.
Savathun goes, I got you. But the Great Emperor had seen death at the edge of the universe and was not afraid for this, which her spawn were not death. But that's what but she's the master of
She's shapeshifter, and
she's the master of manipulation. And she did say, when she left Oryx, and she in the Book of Sorrow, where they went off and did their own thing. We don't know where she went. She ended up in a black hole at some point, but that didn't work. But where did she go after that?
Right.
And what has she been doing?
And then
I know I'm throwing theories.
No, yeah. Well, and that's the thing with as soon as you introduce Savathun, that's where it kind of gets dicey, because the other thing is I'm trying to also stay, trying to stay in character as far as like examining what's being said here, because if this is a history that's controlled by Calus, there's machinations that can be being made here that it's just there's a lot that can be going on, and until we get a little bit more concrete primary sources, it's kind of hard to say what exactly is a fever dream and what's not, I guess would be the best way to do it.
The ending, just the ending of this card.
Oh, the footnote, the footnote is like the best part of this and the next card. Like it's just so so great. So so basically the ending of 25 is Ixalt calling out Shagak for basically being too imaginative, and he's like, and remember, Shagak is the primary, Ixalt is the secondary. So Ixalt is calling out Shagak, probably in a similar fashion to Shagak calling out Tazalt, and there's a competition going on there. So also remember that too, and you see that he calls Shagak out because he says, refrain from making such sweeping, grandiose assumptions about unknowable technologies like those of the Anithium worlds. It will save us a great deal of rewriting later. Delete this footnote upon the actualization of this history and appropriate corrections made to scribe Shagak's record. So, I mean, he's basically calling him out for incorrect information. And Shagak fires back on the next one.
My dearest scribe Isolde,
this is like reading.
A lack of imagination is a crime far worse than any small exaggeration meant to uphold and approach the glory of our beloved emperor. History is made as much in the writing as it is in the living.
This is like reading Rahul. Whatever his Ives. Like, it's just like, I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing.
They had to replace Ives somehow, and this is how they did it.
Oh my god. Yep. So this one is, I think this is 1135. Basically, this is where we destroy everything and recreate the system. He finishes eating Nessus, which is then transferred into royal wine. Nessus and the planetoid of Nessus has its eternal home at the Emperor's table, forever immortalized as a symbol of celebration. Following the destruction of the war machine Rasputin, the Shadow of Earth recreated the region of Hellas Basin into a monument of the might and beauty of the great Emperor Calus. The unsightly Braytech futurescape was demolished and remade into the Temple of Revelry, where all in the system came to celebrate the accomplishments, and the blemished red sands of Mars were reformed into a vast sulphurous mudflat, suitable for wallowing at leisure, because there's nothing more relaxing than laying in some mud with a lot of sulfur.
Space.
Well,
rhinos.
okay.
No.
Okay. I can argue this. Mud baths are actually really relaxing. They're really weirdly and oddly gross at the same time, but they are relaxing if you can get past that point.
I'm way too like tactile. Like no. It's
the bathers all over it.
Yeah. Yeah. On Earth, humanity celebrates the feast of Emperor Calus, a day of jubilation and thanksgiving. Oh god, my brain is. Anyway, children wear golden masks of the Thanksgiving, and then the feasting on supple flesh. It's just no. Children wear golden masks of the Emperor's fine visage and reenact the story. Yeah. See, that's where my brain went. Reenact the story of how he remade the system in the shadow of the end of the world. So, like, basically, he's bringing joy and freedom, blah blah blah,
in the final days.
Because nothing matters anymore. And then what is that?
Reading the footnote.
Oh yeah, the footnotes are just...
The footnote makes the card.
I really, honestly, some of them I just am like, just read the footnotes. 1242 is... Oh, this is the one where he shares the Great Revelation. Sorry, chat. The Great Revelation, which Emperor Calus received at the end of the universe, so way back when he had his hallucination, his fever dream, is described by the Emperor to his royal scribes here. His description is indeed what came to pass and is happening now 118 years after the Emperor brought liberty to the Sol system. Okay, so, I guess that's some time. First, the veil of darkness descended on the whole worlds, blah, blah, blah. Many deaths occurred.
The Great War broke out across the varieties of civilization, be they naturally war-minded or peaceful.
Right, because basically the changing environment was such that they all panicked. So they just basically... I mean, it's riots is really what's going on.
The collapse, part 2.
Yeah, it's the second collapse.
Yeah, that's... let's see here... As far as the footnote, it's not very funny about the footnote.
No, this one's just basically, again... Same thing. I'm trying to remember the... Oh, no. Right, sorry, hang on. To clarify real quick. The Great War broke out across all varieties of civilization. This warring, which goes on even now, is due to a futile desire to postpone the end of things when no such deferment can possibly occur. As such, the civilizations of the Sol system do not partake, for they accept the coming end as shown to them by their beloved Emperor. Even so, these good creatures are not exempt from the miserable clawing of others who thrash blindly against the inevitable end. So basically, the Sol system doesn't fall on itself, but is rather felled on by other systems, is kind of what I took from that. And then, I mean, basically, I don't really have anything to say about the next paragraph, but it's basically like death will soon arrive to the universe and claim all of it for itself. This will be the end of everything, all living things and non-living things, all that is real or theoretical. The 9, basically. And then the last to see death as it consumes everything in this world will be the great Emperor himself, i.e. he is the final shape.
I wonder if he got his knowledge, the hive. I know they were studying Calus, privy to this Gaul. He probably had access.
Gaul being in power doesn't necessarily blind the Emperor to everything.
True, yeah.
Necessarily.
And then...
Because he has a pretty good understanding of sword logic.
Right. Well, yeah, and yeah. This last one is, I believe this is, 1243. This is actually an entry that is written by Calus himself, understandably, because he's supposed to be the only one left. However, it's already written, so, take that for what it's worth. And it's basically this giant monologue speech that he's giving to the Guardian, our Guardian. Or in remembrance to the Guardian, and to thank the Guardian for all that it was done. That was always done in his name. So his checklist is complete, and he checks off the last thing, and then supposedly this would be where the end occurs.
Darkness eats everything. But it doesn't just eat just our system.
Mm-hmm. I mean, our ghost did get injured in one of the earlier cards.
Yeah, I can't remember if it's in this one.
It's pretty early.
Was it in the Chronicon?
Pretty sure it's in the Chronicon. You guys talk about something. I will keep trying.
Because I'm trying to remember. Because there's also there's scenes of us and like the Drifter when we feed we feed a Guardian his own ghost. I think it's the Drifter. Ah, that's right. Okay, Dino. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the opulent armor. Is when
killed. Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't read the opulent armor.
So yeah, I mean,
this one messes with your head for sure. Just this whole book.
Well, and the challenge, right, is that it's like
it does talk about it here. Found it.
Okay.
It's MCX, so it's what would that be? 1117. Okay. It says, en route to the planet's inner sanctum, where Anathem's world knowledge was kept, the shadows were stalked an undocumented species of indigenous wildlife whose natural capabilities as a predator prove unexpectedly debilitating to the companion soul of the shadow of Earth. The shadow, being symbiotically reliant on its companion soul, was thus weakened, and the trio was forced to biovac in place beneath a great monolith as a storm fell upon them. So this is happening on that World X.
Right, okay.
So it does happen there.
But does the ghost die there?
No, it doesn't say it dies. I said it got hurt. It got injured.
Oh, okay. I got you. Because I think in
one of the other ones, it does say the ghost is killed.
I think that's the Opulent Greaves.
Drifters.
Yeah.
Drifter has his own ghost fed to him in pieces.
Yeah, Opulent Greaves is what Dinah was saying here, which is where the shadow of Earth slays their soul, companion soul.
Yeah.
Which is like a painful one to read. Because you basically are being, like, it's you, or the Guardian, Calus, and then the Ghost, and then the Guardian kills the Ghost, and then the Guardian dies, and then Calus is left by himself.
Yeah, I'm reading the companion because that is.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of messed up.
Oh yeah,
stuff
the opulent armor.
The armor's way worse
it
than this
so
whole book.
is.
This book is like a freaky trip through drugs. Don't do drugs, kids. That's what this is. The opulent is just disturbing.
The opulent armor is basically the details of our Guardian slaying all the various characters. That's the Petra, Osiris, Failsafe,
Drifter, Osiris,
Varix,
Failsafe,
all of them. Our Ghost.
Failsafe's is sad.
Yeah, well, I mean, our Ghost is sad. The last words of the Ghost.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you. I'm like, nope. I'm gonna stop reading now.
A whole bunch of nope.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so, that's the opulent armor is very interesting. Yeah, Dino, opulent armor is the murder fest.
It kind of goes into the entire overarching, what's the word? I'm trying to think of the right word. The mirage that Calus is, not the mirage, like the show that Calus is trying to put on to lure us into, becoming his shadow. That's his ultimate plan, is he wants us to, this is what he wants. He wants us to usher in the end of the, or help him usher in the end of the. I would say that a majority of the population of the Guardians and things like that, they're falling. I don't want to say they're falling for it, but they're rushing in there to go get the loot, and they don't realize the kind of like consequences of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's bread and circuses. I mean,
right? Yeah, that's a good way. It's this is everything that Calus puts for the later half of this entire book is prophesized. It's not going to happen. There's that one degree of truth where if our Guardian wanted to, if this is the way they went down, if they don't walk that path, it very easily could be the end of everything.
The thing that bugs me about this book, I understand the first half of it as far as like the actual Chronicon aspect of it. But the later half of this book, what is the purpose? Is it literally just to make Calus happy? Is it a practice in boredom between these two scribes?
Well, Dino's right. Yeah, Dino's right too. It's 2.62%.
Right. It's a very small aspect of the full Chronicon, but what is the point? What is the point of this book? That is something that has bugged me since this book got released.
Are you asking what our thoughts are on that one?
Yes, I am asking for open opinions and spin foil upon this as a way
you're correct on that, because here's the thing. Remember when this book was started, it was meant to be kind of that chronicle of their exile, right? It's the Robin Crusoe-esque, story of Calus. And then the main scribe kind of called out, you're having a fever dream. You lost, it's not oxygen, but basically you couldn't breathe and you're hallucinating. And Calus had him boiled and, removed him. So the replacement, it's that moment where you replace someone that you kill because they weren't a yes man or yes person, and the person that you replace them with is mysteriously going to do whatever you tell them to do. It's not unheard of, and it's not uncommon for that to happen. And then it's just basically, then it starts becoming an echo chamber, because then there's no one who's going to argue with Calus, because Calus will just have him killed until the only people who are left are either the people who know how to shut up and say, sure, that sounds like a great idea. Because at the other side of the fact is the fact that they're all stuck on the Leviathan with him. There's no like, oh hey, we're gonna go get supplies and never come back. It's you're stuck there and you're on a prison ship, and it kind of gets the idea that like there's probably not a lot of hesitation to throw you into the prison aspect of the ship. He has he has enough loyalists that are loyal to him blindly. That Dino is saying that right now. Then they need to be educated and enlightened. It's the whole psychological experiment of it's not really Zimbardo's experiment, but it's pretty close to it, which is the prison experiment where you lock people into a room and you convince you basically you're one half. This half is guards, this half is prisoners, and you basically watch the degradation of everything because if you put people in a vacuum, it's Lord of Flies. Like, it's a natural thing for human beings to group into separate groups. And once that starts occurring, it's very difficult for those groups to naturally there is an eventual conflict that is going to happen. Now, how those groups resolve conflict, that's not necessarily always predetermined. There's always going to be, an openness to different resolutions. But Calus has demonstrated that his resolution to conflict is to eradicate. So if you don't have if you're part of a minority group such as the Scions, who are scribes, I mean, the Scions are already second-class citizens in the Cabal Empire. Now, granted, Calus views them as equals to a degree, but he also has no obvious problem just outright killing people who disagree with him or who question him even.
It's
Dino's saying that too. Sorry, yeah.
No, I was catching up with what Dino was saying. Shoot, he's very on the money with it.
He speaks quietly, and he has a ship that eats your planet. Like, I mean, sorry. So for the podcast, Dino is saying Calus says that the Cabal fleet that I remember shocked with its allure and refinement. They would never threaten. Our power was such that our threats were unspoken and always present. And Dino makes the point, I don't think that's limited to the military. I mean, you see that within the political thing with the whole Colosseum, right, with Gaul. Calus would force his political opponents to bet against Gaul. And everyone knew Gaul would win. But they were forced to bet against Gaul so that then they would lose everything. And it was a point of like narcissistic pride of his to set them up for failure. But the game was rigged from the start.
Right.
And I think that's where...
Black Flag said, very mob boss.
Right, yeah. It's very, like... And Dino makes the point that that's probably why the Talazat stuff was left in. And so basically you see what happens if you step out of... You toe the line, you're no longer going to be...
You get made into a gold shiny statue.
Yeah, you toe the line, you get new boots made out of gold bricks and thrown into the... I don't know if does that answer or make sense, Green? Because I mean, that's what, like, when I read this, that's really all I pick up on is that these writers, this isn't what they think. This is them. This is them trying to survive.
It paints the warnings in a whole different light than the warnings between each of them. One of them is pushing too far into the realm of impossibility, and the other one gets worried about it, kind of thing. I don't think that's necessarily the case between Shagak and Isolt, but it kind of, if that is the case, if this is them purely trying to survive and out of like fear, which I don't think is necessarily the case, that would make those footnotes very different.
Well, I would disagree to a point because that's assuming that both of them feel the same. You can, I mean, this is like entering into like Machiavellian political theory and stuff like that too. You can have one, and also it also depends. Hang on, let me start that sentence over. It also assumes that both of those scribes are reacting to fear, if that is the fear, the same way. people who are threatened by like life and death situations, they have very different reactions. Like everyone has a different fight or flight level that will trigger each one, right? That everyone has a different basically trigger point there. And so one trigger point could be lower, thus creating this like frantic, over imaginative, trying to, sweet talk and blah, blah, doing what he's told or they're told, and, doing it over to the top. And the other one might be, okay, well, no, hang on. It's like, hang on, whoa. We need to play this smarter. We don't want to overdo it because then you get in trouble, and so that's kind of where I saw that kind of snipping back and forth.
It could be. It just doesn't. It seems like it would be written in a slightly different way, personally. But that may be just my.
Oh no, and I mean, I think
thing
right,
on that.
and again, kind of the Machiavellian. That's like the Machiavelli, like better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Well, one person's fear, what would cause fear in one person might not cause fear in another. That might cause respect. So you also have that dichotomy going on as well, right? You could have the imaginative one could be a zealot. He's a zealot of Calus. He's 100% in on this grand, doomsday, blah blah blah. He's a what are they? The disaster guys. The Oh, no, not
Doomsday Sailors.
No. The survivalists, the
the preppers.
Yes, prepper. He's like, I got my underground bunker. It's got gallons of water. Like, I mean, like he's got the whole thing. He's got the seeds. He's got the seeds in the place that just flooded because all the ice melted, and he's got his water. I mean, like he's done. The other guy's like, I don't believe any of this nonsense, but I also understand that guy just got dumped in a vat of gold, of like molten gold. So I'm going to say we believe this, and, and so there's also like, there's a lot of different ways that you can play those two, because there are two separate ones. And, that's just kind of the way I kind of take it, is like, they're kind of like, they also have the like very stereotypical, I don't want to call him, it's not like a stereotypical archivist, but it's a stereotypical like researcher. It's not arrogance. It's and it's not the negative sense of ego, but it's that ego of like, I know what we're doing and you are doing it wrong. And it's the interpretation of how history should be stated, right? And you see that
it's the class project,
right? Yeah,
it's the this is in the class.
This is the group project, and they happen to find the two people who actually wanted to work on it. Normally it's one person who's doing the group project, and everyone else is just lazing around. No, this group has two people who want to do the project, and it's just I don't know. I enjoyed it because I was like, this actually kind of gives a peek underneath the hood of what is basically just false information, and it's blatantly false information, and you can kind of see the scribes are kind of being snippy about how they're gilding this particular hot air balloon, basically, so that it doesn't blow up in their face, is kind of how I see it.
Do you think there's rumors on the Leviathan about Calus's robotic form? Totally different subject.
I think there are, because within Confession, even Match has doubts.
Questions.
Like, yeah, even Match, like near the end of Confessions, Match makes a number of like kind of, I can't remember if he actually comes out and asks, but like I know he makes comments about he hasn't seen Calus and all this. He hasn't seen the real Calus, which makes me think that he's talking to an automaton. So.
It's an interesting book in terms of, even if it is, it's a book full of lies, and that apparently Savathun has, she's in between the lines again, as she mentions in Truth to Power. It's as false as the information is that Lou was talking about. It really indicates, and I know this is not going to be some oh my god moments. It's we're moving towards something, and even the false information is picking up on that. There's something coming. It's maybe it's really close, maybe it's really far away, but it's coming, and it's only a matter of time until it's on on top of us, and it's kind of like that undertone that I get from the entire because he's right. It's like there's a lot of bias and made up history here, and you can't tell what's true and what's fake. But ultimately, something big is coming. And Calus either thinks he sees it, or he knows what it is, or he has this grand image of him being the hero at the end of the world. Something's coming. Either it's the darkness, or it's Savathun, or it's the Vex, or it's something. How close or how far away still have to be determined.
Green, you have any other thoughts?
The headache of it.
Anything involving Calus, Savathun, just Savathun is an instant headache.
Well, Savathun's an instant headache. The Chronicon is kind of a headache just because of the absurdity of it. And I think, I'm trying to remember my exact thoughts at the extra lore panel. My thoughts on the Chronicon were kind of given at that panel. So if you have not watched that is available to watch. Blue probably has the link available.
Yeah, it's on the Lore Network.
Probably also has the clip of the lore breaking when it said, "Let's not save Cade." Fun to watch the chat lose their mind on that. That
was the actual lore panel, the after lore panel.
Oh, right. Sorry.
When we were doing the sit down with Bifebeard, Mylan, Purple, Baxter, all of them. The Chronicon got brought up at least in part, and my thoughts was just, it is not my favorite book, but I think its importance is yet to be determined. I think there are things that may come later that bring light to the importance of it, but it is okay to also have a book that is not groundbreaking like the Maracena or the Books of Sorrow. Mm-hmm. So much of what we have lately has been really integral to the fabric of the whole world, and maybe having a book that is not super integrated into everything going on isn't a bad thing. And if this is, maybe we'll find out later.
Right. And I think that's the other thing too, is like, with a lot of the parallels that we see with this book to the Books of Sorrow, right? I think it's also important to realize, or to remember, that the Cabal have never been you never would have described the Cabal as a religious species, not like the Hive. And so when you see these weird attempts at assimilation of different aspects of what would be basically various theologies, you have the Awoken theology of the Maracena, the Hive theology of the Books of Sorrow. And I use the word theology very loosely there. But when you see that type of belief structure, and then you see the Cabal with the Chronicon and Calus trying to, in a way, recreate that, it also is I think it's kind of an interesting twist on what the Cabal have always been presented as, because in our experience of the Cabal, they've always been very pragmatic and in the moment, right? But we've also only experienced the military arm of the Cabal. Calus represents something more, but also less than the military. Like he's a politician within that, and so there's the sense of loyalty that a theology can give the impression of is desired by most politicians. They want that blind loyalty. I mean, you hear that throughout this entire book. And so I also would say, think of it as an attempt of Calus to, do yet another round of, quote, air quote, educate his followers and his loyalists to make sure that they are truly loyal. He's kind of presenting himself as the deity of the Cabal, which is a new concept possibly to the Cabal. They don't really seem to have deities in the sense that the Hive do. Like the Hive have the siblings and then the worm gods. They have an actual name, worm gods. They refer to them as deities. The Awoken don't have deities, but they ascribe to the view of Mara as their queen. Like all the Reefborn Awoken are Reefborn, or they are there because they chose to stay because of Mara, as opposed to the Earthborn. Yeah. And then the Guardians have the Traveler. There's all the speed, and the Vex have, the Vex have a weird hierarchical loyalty imbued in their mind structures. And that loyalty is always questioned. The Fallen have their houses and the Great Machine. There's a sense in theology in everything except for the Cabal. And so I also would say that you could see this as being kind of maybe a possible attempt from Calus to bring that concept into their culture as well.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about that now. I'm like, whoa.
Well, and I think the reason why that keeps kind of bouncing around in the back of my head is because, again, there is a lot of parallels to the various mythologies, if you allow me to call them that, the historiologies of the different species. We see a lot of those parallels, as we've talked about, in this book. And so, again, Cabal, Roman, what are the Romans known for? Assimilation.
Assimilating.
And if they see something that works, they're gonna take it. Like, that's what Rome does. They were very good at it. I mean, they were very good at it. And, Calus, I mean, for whatever reason, he could see the Books of Sorrow as being something that, the Hive are dead set to sword logic. You can't, I mean, you can say a lot of things about the Hive, but that's one thing that I think everyone would probably agree pretty much on.
He says, Calus says that in the Menagerie.
Yeah, they're fixated on it. The Awoken, same. You have like our conversation about Petra. She's loyal to death and beyond to Mara. And most of the Awoken who are in the Reef are gonna probably fall in that camp as well. Guardians to Traveler or Humanity, whichever one, the last city, basically. They have individual differences on why they ally themselves to that, but ultimately it all flows up to either the Traveler or Humanity or the concept of both, whatever, the light. And so each of those things, and then the Elixni are bound to their houses, and now they're kind of in this weird transitory phase where we don't really know what they're doing. But when Calus would see them, they were bound to the Great Machine, and then the houses were very feudal in nature and all that. And that's never really been something that the Cabal have shown. And that's why I'm like, I keep seeing these parallels, and then I'm like, there's a gap there. So to me, it kind of makes sense that might be a puzzle piece that Calus is trying to squeeze in somehow.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot to think about. So I'm sitting here going,
Yeah, lots of questions, not a lot of direct answers. Mm-hmm. I think we'll just have to
welcome to a Bungie
cheesy.
game.
Welcome to a Bungie game, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Yep. So
we have to wait and see, and we may not ever get the answer.
I mean,
that
but that's also to go down the cheesy route. That's also kind of part of life, right? You look for answers and you might not get them. That's just that's part of it, and it's not always the best thing, but that's just something that sometimes there's not answers. Sometimes it's about the question, not the answer, and that's another thing. So real quick, those shout outs, guys. Potato, who do we want to do shout outs from you?
Shout out to you guys for Green for just let me jump in here last minute. And just everyone we saw at GuardianCon. I know Doom was there. I know we didn't get to hang out too much. Doom, Hex, and all the guys from Hydra and Wicked and Razor and everybody that I'm forgetting because it is 1 o'clock in the morning. No, it was great to see everyone at GuardianCon. Can't wait till next year. Again, thank you guys for letting me in on here, speaking my ramblings and my spin foil and theories and stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Green, what about
you guys?
Green, what about
find me anywhere.
Oh yeah, and of course I will include links to Potato stuff all with this episode. So when you hear top 3, also just go back to the show notes for this episode, and they'll be there as well. Or you can hit the Podbean site. We always have the links embedded in there as well. But Green, what about you?
It's to 2 people, one who is here, one who is not, both voice actors. One to Mr. Potato himself, our voice actor extraordinaire. If you guys have never listened to the what do we call them? The lore supplements?
The audio supplements,
The audio supplements, yeah.
The audio supplements. So Most Loyal is one of them that Potato did. Potato's done a few different ones and is currently in the process of working on another one. Go listen to them. They're very well done. There's lots of dynamic aspects to it. I don't know how you do some of the things with your voice that you do, and it is impressive. And my shout out goes to both you and Morla, Miss Eris Morn herself, because you both managed to basically make me speechless while sitting next to you both at GuardianCon, listening to you guys talk about essentially grunting.
Oh yeah, the singing, the singing conversation.
The ball exercise. The ball exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. It was them grunting at like 10 a.m. the second day of Guardian Con, and I'm sitting here smiling because I know exactly what they're doing.
It's so funny listening to that with like the idea that someone who has no idea what you're saying is going to be like, "Wait, what?" Like that's awesome.
I'm okay with this.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, basically, it's fine. It's voice acting, it's voice training, vocal training. It was just very fun to watch both of you talk to each other, because you guys are both very adamant about your craft in your own ways. You with your haunted houses and the marathon of what goes into that, and her with her career, essentially. So it's my shout outs go to both of you and any voice actor out there who is passionate about what they do.
She was an absolute sweetheart and very, very nice and very, very humble. And she shared a couple of stories with us later that night. We actually ran into her again at the bar later that night. And she shared some amazing stories of just the influence for how she got the emotion behind Eris and things like that. And that's
an awesome story.
And it was awesome story. And but no, absolutely, I share that sentiment. Sorry.
You're good. Blue.
Just a big shout out to everyone who is in live chat now. We appreciate you guys being in there, making sure that I'm not speaking incorrect information. I love the fact checking from everybody. I also love like watching the humor that you guys bring to that makes my night. And so really big thank you. If you haven't been able to make it to a live stream, I really encourage you to try. It's a hilarious event. Much more unfiltered than the eventual audio file that you guys are listening to on the podcast. But it's an enjoyable. I think that a lot of people enjoy it. But yeah, that, and then also if you're not in our Discord chat, I definitely encourage you to get in there and interact with everyone there. It's just, you guys are a great group. Destiny's community has always been a just freaking amazing place, and I'm just so thankful that you guys are there, because you make gaming you guys are the embodiment of what a gaming community should be. And I think that is not said enough, and I think that it needs to be said more, but I think that's really, really important to remember. So again, just thank you for being you, whoever you are. But yeah, so with that being said, we will see you next week. We are going to be talking about, I believe, Sparrow Racing next week, so that should be interesting.
Marcus Wren.
I was about to say we might be ratcheting down a little bit further and looking at Marcus Wren in particular. I think that's kind of where a lot of the conversation that I've seen so far has been going, which makes sense. He's pretty prolific right now in the lore. So Marcus and Dee Dee might be, well, they will be guest of honor, I guess, on the topic on the topic board there. So you guys have a great week. Hopefully your week is not too hard, and we will see you next week on either the live chat or in your podcast feed.
See ya.
Bye.
With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/focusedfirechat. Links to all our episode archives can also be found at www.focusedfirechat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments or questions for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. Also, be sure to check out all the amazing work being featured over on thelorenetwork.com. So until next time, focus your fire, and may your light shine bright.